So, hey, this whole unit is about motion, so I have a question for you. Don't shout anything out, think in your head. If somebody is in a coma, and they are in a hospital bed, and they are laying there, is there motion? Is that person experiencing motion? Don't say anything, just think your own thought about it. All right, what do you think, Brookston?
Yes,
Tell me why.
because feeling that motion, I don't know.
Okay,
I just think
Jane?
it's yes. I don't
Okay,
know.
what do you think?
It's yes,
Why?
because it's got motion inside of it.
Tell me how.
Heart beating, blood flowing.
Okay, so there's internal motion, maybe lungs up and down.
Because they're not dead yet.
Okay, and so if they were totally dead, then you're saying that then there would be no heartbeat, no blood flowing, no lungs, okay? Any other yes or no's, explanations? Any thoughts? I saw some of you were like, I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer necessarily.
Wouldn't they be motion if they're taking that little thing and it's like pumping that stuff into their body?
Okay, so like if medicine is like being pumped in, you mean?
Yeah.
Sure. Sure. Anything else? Huh?
Yeah, like the tube that they have sometimes down their throat to help them breathe.
Okay.
Road.
Yes. You know
No,
what I'm talking about?
yeah, the intubation tube.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that's currently in the word.
Sure. Any other thoughts? What do you think?
IV.
Okay, so maybe if there's an IV, for sure. Anything more in general? Does anybody say no, they're not moving? Any bigger?
Their brain
Hey.
still.
Oh, so there's like brain activity or movement?
Yeah.
Okay,
What if he's brain hurt?
then maybe take that out, possibly. What do you think, Garrett?
Gotta breathe, their chest is moving.
Okay. What do you think, Echo?
I say yes and no,
Okay, tell me.
because they may not be physically moving, but they're internally.
Okay, good explanation. Yeah, good clarification. And again, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just like, how are you like explaining your answer? Anybody think about all of us right now being on planet Earth?
Rotation.
Not for long.
Earth is-
rotation.
Right, the Earth is rotating and it's also
Gravity.
revolving. So not only the Earth is spinning, but it's also revolving around the sun. So there's actually two circular motions that are happening to all of us right now. And so the difference in all of your answers comes down to something called frame of reference. What are you comparing that motion to? And that can definitely change the way something looks. The motion itself might not be any different, but how we perceive it. And that video yesterday did a really good job of showing, like, you know, if you're focused on one thing, the motion might look one way. If you focus on something else, it might look a different way. Like how at the beginning, like if they told you to move back and forth and like that thing looked like it was pulsing, right? So it showed a lot of really good examples. We're gonna look at motion in one dimension, meaning we're not looking at it moving two-dimensionally or three-dimensionally. We're looking at it very simply. And so this is kind of like thinking of a train moving along a straight track. Right, we're just looking. Now, I'm not saying that things can't make a turn, but we're only looking at it in one plane. All right, so it's not like it's gonna go, you know, in multiple dimensions. We're keeping it very straightforward. As you get into physics, you know, that you might take possibly as a junior, you know, maybe, you know, you'll get into some two-dimensional motion at that point. But we're going to keep it pretty simple. That's what physical science is. This is an introduction to a lot of different sciences. Oops. And so we're going to notice that motion takes place over time and distance. And those are actually going to be two of our variables that we're going to get really familiar with. All right, so we're gonna look at something called a frame of reference, and this is one of your vocab terms. Frame of reference provides you something to compare motion to. it's really hard to talk about motion without talking about this point of view, or what we call the frame of reference. Without it, sometimes it can be really confusing. If you're trying to describe something to someone, they're like, no, it's like this. And so even like those two white dots that like crossed each other or hit and bounced, the people were looking at the same thing, but they were describing it differently. That sound actually added kind of a frame of reference. And that's why when you heard the sound, that's when the people thought that those two balls kind of were hitting like cue ball or pool balls and were ricocheting instead of passing through. And so this frame of reference can have a huge impact on what the motion actually is being perceived as, right? And so if you think about like Googling like directions to somewhere, if I want to go to Burger King and I put in Burger King locations, what do I have to do so that I get the correct turn-by-turn directions? If I just put in the destination, is that good enough? What's it always ask you before it'll give you turn-by-turn directions? It might tell you how long it takes, but if I'm putting it in my phone, I want Burger King, what do I need, Dane?
Yeah, you gotta tell them where you're at.
You gotta tell them where you're starting, that starting location, right? So whether it's your current location, because if I would put in Burger King, the directions from here would be different than if I was at home, right? So I would have to be very clear on where I'm starting or wanting these turn-by-turn directions to start from. And so that's kind of like the frame of reference. The Burger King itself is not changing, but where I'm starting my directions from might change. And that's what is important. And so this frame of reference provides us with that kind of same information. And really, motion is just relative. It's who is looking at it, who's interpreting it. The motion itself is not changing, but what is the perception of the motion. And the video yesterday showed that really, really good. Did I go too fast? Okay, and so, I have an embarrassing example, but I will share it with you. So when my son was a freshman in high school, he like tore his knee up really bad, like where the tendon for your kneecap attaches, pulled the chunk of his tibia off, and so like a chunk of the bone was where his kneecap should have been, and his kneecap went up into his quad. Like that whole tendon was stronger than the bone and just ripped the bone off. It was a mess. Like he was in Children's Hospital for like 3 days. Like his leg was this huge. Like it was bad, like really bad. And it was the second day of school for me, so it was really bad timing too. So he's big. He's like 6'1" and like 200 pounds. And so even as a freshman, he was pretty big. And we had been home. He'd been home from the hospital had the surgery after it was like a week or two, and he had to go in for his first checkup. And so we go to the doctor's appointment. He's traumatized, devastated. It's going to be months. Like he can't play football. Like it was a thing. Like it was bad. And so he's depressed. We're on our way home, and I'm like, "Are you hungry?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm hungry." I'm like, "Okay, what do you want?" He's like, "Let's just go to Subway." I was like, "Okay." And I was like, "Well, just stay in here. I'll run in." And he's like, "No, I'm going in." So I'm like, "Just stay in the car. Like it's too much of an ordeal to get him in and out. Like his leg is locked straight. He can't even get in and out very easy. Like he doesn't fit. And I have an SUV, but like he still just like, if you have your leg locked and you're 6'1", it's kind of hard to fit." And he was just being stubborn. I'm like, "Fine, just come in, whatever." So he comes in, we go back out. At this point, I was very sleep deprived, I'm not gonna lie, because like every 4 hours he had this ice machine, so I had to keep putting these huge chunks of ice in the ice machine, or his leg would swell, and they're like, it could cut off circulation, he could lose like, it was crazy. So I had not had sleep in like 2 weeks, and I'm stressed out, like it was legit, so that's my excuse. So we go, like, we're coming out of Subway, I have the car door open, and he's like trying to like get in the car, and like he's like got his leg up, and he's like trying to get his big self in there, and all of a sudden like I thought our car was moving, which makes no rational sense because the car was not on. Like neither one of us were in it, hadn't started it, and I thought it was on. His leg is like hanging out the door. $40,000 knee surgery, and his leg's there, door's open. I'm thinking like he's about to get run over by our car, and like, it was like the craziest thing. I start screaming, I'm like, oh my God, Tate, get in! And he's like, what is wrong with you? So we're like screaming at each other in the subway parking lot, and there's a car next to us that was backing out. We weren't moving at all. It was awful. Like even thinking about it makes me sweat. It was that bad. Like, I swear to you, I thought he was getting like ran over and like his leg was gonna get ripped off from our car door. None of it was rational. None of it made sense. But because I saw that motion out of the corner of my eye, I felt like we're getting in the car, our car would be the one moving. Like, it didn't occur to me that this parked car next to us could be moving. It wasn't parked anymore. They were in the car and they were backing up. So I'm screaming, he's screaming. The car next to us is looking at us like, what is going on? And then like, I was just like, oh my God, oh my gosh. And he's like, you're crazy. What's wrong with you? This is just nuts. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I know, I'm so tired, like, it was bad. So that is my huge, but have you ever felt that? And they talked about it like on the video, like subway or being on a bus, but like if you are stopped at a light and like something moves, you feel like you're the one moving and you're not, like you get that weird, almost like deja vu, like, ooh, like that weird feeling. I hope none of you ever have it as bad as I had it. Like, I seriously, like, thinking about it makes me sweat. Just, well, it was bad. Like, I thought he was dead. And that was 8 years ago. Like, and none of it makes sense. But sleep deprived, like, that is part of my excuse. So anyways, it's because of this idea of frame of reference. Our brain can trick us. So if you've ever been sitting at a light and the bus or vehicle next to you is stopped, you're not really paying attention, and this is kind of where I was. Like, I was so like tired and just stressed, and I was frustrated because if he had just stayed in this stinking car and let me go into Subway, like it would have been so much easier. And like then I saw that movement, and like my brain just read it wrong, right? It feels like you're the one that's moving when you're not, right? Because you had made the vehicles around you part of the road. That they should be the ones, you know, like where it's not moving. And so when you feel that motion, it just tricks you. And so it was actually, you know, like the bus moving forward, but your brain knows that the bus was just sitting there, making it part of the road. And so it becomes that frame of reference for your brain, right? And so you saw the bus moving forward, you'd already decided that the bus wouldn't move. And so the only option is that you are the one moving, which is incorrect. So that is kind of the science behind it. Again, hopefully you never go through a traumatic experience like that, but.
How did you do it to his knee?
So he had just broken his foot and he had just healed up. We were back from the doctor that afternoon and he was cleared. He was going to be able to play, like go start playing, like he was in shape. He was going to be able to jump right in and start playing football. He was going to like get to play that Friday. And he was just jogging in the yard and it just snapped. And like he had huge, like there's a huge hole where his kneecap should have been. It was insane. Like he was screaming and I was just like, I don't even understand what I'm looking at right now. It was funky. But anyways, still makes me crazy. We'll come back to this in a minute. And so here's another thing. Anybody here motion sick or get car sick? Or sometimes it comes and goes. Again, this is the same reason why you get sick. Your brain is getting two sets of information that are conflicting. Like if you focus long, like ahead of you, it looks still, but if you can see the stuff whizzing by, so it's like your brain just crosses and the senses get confused. And so a lot of times if you can focus up ahead of something not moving or of something in the car that's not moving and try not to like focus on the whizzing by, that can help. But again, it's because your brain is basically kind of crossing those signals. Okay, we'll get to that in a minute too. All right. Yeah. So I don't mind sharing like embarrassing things. I have a lot of stupid things I've done. Okay, so we're going to look at something called scalar and vector. These are two vocab terms as well. Vector includes three things. It's gonna include, the size of something or the magnitude, which is the number. It's gonna also include a unit, like, a kilometer, an hour, a second, and it's also gonna include a direction. This is the key, it includes direction. Right, so something like displacement of 2.0 meters north. There's the magnitude, there's the unit, and then that capital N is representing north. Right, and so for something to be vector, it has to have all three of those things. So from here on out, units are gonna be massively important. And I kind of started preaching about this when we did density, and it is not going away. Like, this is still a very important part of representing your answer. So a velocity of 30 kilometers per hour east. And again, that little slash, like the video said, means per or divided. So a kilometer divided by an hour east. And so vector quantities are shown by an arrow drawn above a letter sometimes. We talked about vectors a little bit in 8th grade science with those contact forces, if forces are coming together, if they're moving apart. So we have talked about them. I have another little video we'll look at here in a minute as well. Anybody recognize vectors from math? Does that sound familiar at all?
I was gonna say.
Well, and that, yeah, Vector the villain, yeah, we're gonna look at that, where he describes his name and why he's called that. So we'll get to that here in just a second too. All right, so then the other side of vector is something called scalar quantities or scalar amounts. So scalar is a magnitude and a unit, but it does not include direction. So like that video showed, speed would be considered scalar because we don't care about direction. Velocity would be considered vector because it includes a direction. So the only difference between something being scalar and something being vector is vector has a direction. That becomes important, right? And so here's some examples. If you just say a distance of 2 meters, I don't know if I'm going left, right, up, down, north, south, east, west. I have no idea. But I know that something went 2 meters. Right? So sometimes the situation, it doesn't matter what direction you're headed. And so speed is a perfectly fine way, or distance is perfectly fine. We don't need to include the direction. So 40 kilometers per hour. A time of 3.4 hours. Right, so all of those would be scalar quantities. All right, so physical quantities are, it's just another way of saying an amount of something. Maybe it's an amount of time, an amount of distance, an amount of speed, right? Quantity is just an amount. So if we're looking at different quantities, there's two main types. The vector, which has magnitude, direction, and of course units. Scalar has just magnitude and units. And again, magnitude, just like we talked last year with earthquakes, they're registered with like the Richter scale, and we call them magnitudes. So there were actually a couple of earthquakes this week, if you've seen that on the news. In Turkey, there was like, I think it was 7.8 magnitude. The 7.8 is the strength or the size, and it's represented with that number of 7.8, right? Yeah, it's pretty significant. 10 is the highest. There was quite a bit of damage, and there were a lot of lives lost. There was also 2 earthquakes in Romania over the last 2 days that were like 5, like low on the 5 scale, like 5.3, 5.4. There was damage, but there were no lives lost. Why? What?
Just the top G. I don't know if you said it now.
Romania?
Yeah.
Top G.
Yeah.
Top
G.
Oh my God.
Andrew Tate.
Andrew Tate, he's arrested right now.
Oh, okay.
Was he
He's
hurt?
in jail right now, so it's fine.
Oh, okay, so he's fine.
I don't even know. Okay. Anyways, I'm glad you at least recognize the country of Romania.
Yes.
Yes.
Just 'cause I know you.
And Andrew we trust.
But magnitude is the size of something, and the most common use of magnitude is with the Richter scale with earthquakes, a magnitude of 7.8 on the Richter scale. So magnitude just means size, and we represent that with a number. So it has a number, a direction, and a unit. scalar has just a number and a unit, right? So from now on, the only thing that does not get a unit is slope. For whatever reason, we talked about it with density, we'll talk about it more. You don't have to include a unit with slope. Everything else that we talk about will need to have a unit from here on out. All right, so take a look. I want you to put on your paper, put an S or a V. S if you think it is a scalar amount, put a V if you think it's describing a vector quantity or vector amount. So just take a second, put that S or V, and then we'll go through and see kind of what you're thinking. Mark S or V. So scalar will just have a number and a unit. Vector will have a number, unit, and a direction.
That earthquake in like Holland or something, the also knows this one, and they said, for the next 10 weeks, trapped under rubble for like 3 weeks, like 200 something hours.
Yeah, they've still been finding a lot of survivors.
Yeah, I walked in the living room this morning, and the news was on, and they were talking about, they found a 73-year-old man trapped under the thing for like 200 something
That's
hours.
amazing, yeah.
That's what they made right.
Okay, and that's why they continue to search, because, you know, it's still within that window where people could still be survivors out there, you know, you're trying to get through everything as quick as they can to make sure that they haven't missed anybody. Okay, so 16 years, what do you think, Layla? Is this gonna be scalar or vector? Good, there's no direction. 50 kilometers per hour, Caden? Yep. Okay, so do you see a direction? Scalar, good. 6 kilometers north, Kenna? Good, I see north. So sometimes you can put it in brackets, you don't have to, like, sometimes they just, so it doesn't look like a unit, they do that. 2,000 kilograms per meter, and that should be cubed.
Scale.
Good, there's no direction. 800 kilograms, what do you think? Kendall? Good. 1.0 kilograms per week. What do you think, Andy? Okay, do you see a direction?
No.
Okay, so there we go. Sometimes when the units are really long, people are just like, well, it should be scale or vector because there's a lot to it. Brookston,
Vector.
okay. I see south, S.
Oh,
Good.
yeah. Zombie top.
400 newtons down. Good, down. 6 centuries. Good. No direction included. All right, so we're gonna look at 2 ways to describe length. One of them is one of them is distance, one of them is displacement. One will include direction and one will not. So one's gonna be scalar, one is gonna be vector. So distance is scalar because there's no direction. So I don't care, like I'm just walking or I'm driving or I'm running. I don't care what direction, but I'm covering some ground, covering some length, okay? And so distance is included in this total length of the path. It's the whole trip. So from start to finish, what is the pathway that the object followed? Yes. Yeah. Yeah, right? That's what distance is. It's the whole path. It's the from start to finish, where did it go, every single step, every single twist and turn, okay? We're gonna see in a minute, displacement is a little different. It goes from where you start to where you finish. Doesn't care how you got there, it just wants your initial and your final locations and the length between them, right? So sometimes distance and displacement will be the same thing. Sometimes they'll be different depending on what's actually happening with the movement. So displacement is the change in position. It's vector because you have to include direction. So it only means that you measure, the start to the finish, and how you get there is not important. So if I look up here, the distance is shown in purple or blue, I don't know what that is. This is the whole pathway. This is the person's distance. But the displacement, if it started here and they ended here, that's the displacement, which is a lot shorter in this case than the overall distance. So sometimes they're gonna be different. Okay? Sometimes displacement and distance will be the same, sometimes they will be different, just depends on the situation. Alright, so it doesn't matter how I got there, it doesn't matter that I went all the way and followed this little path. This is all I care about, that little green line. Alright, so to find displacement, it is the change in position. It is our final position minus the initial position. And we can have an equation that represents this. This little x is like looking at like a horizontal change. Think about like a graph. Our horizontal line is our x-axis. Our vertical line is our y-axis. So anytime we're talking about like a horizontal change, like me walking from here to here would be horizontal. If I like climbed a ladder, that would be a vertical change, right? So if I'm talking a change in position horizontally, a lot of times there'll be a change in x. If I'm looking at this change, I might represent this a change in y because it's showing a vertical. So I just want to kind of explain that, like why every once in a while there'll be a y there instead of an x. This little triangle, have we talked about that? We haven't talked about that yet, have we? That, did we? Means a change, right? Changing, it's the delta symbol for change. So like if you see like fraternity and sorority houses, a lot of them, like they have their symbols like delta, 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 or alpha, gamma, delta. The delta is the triangle and it means change. So this little thing means the change in horizontal position. What do you think this F and this little I mean? Any ideas what the F and what the I might mean? Look up at this line. What do you think, Kendall? Absolutely. So final is, what's another name for final? End. What's another name for initial? Begin, start, right? So you're taking your final position and you're going to subtract it from your initial position, all right? And we'll do a lot of practice with this. But again, we talked last year about water displacement. So if you have an initial volume and then you put the weird shaped item in, the change in volume, you take your final volume from your initial volume, the change was caused by the item that you put in, okay? And so that would be like a change in y, would be your final vertical position minus your final initial position, okay? And so it might look like this, change in y, yf minus yi. Typically though, we're gonna use the x's. Position is just a, okay, you gotta stop, thank you. Position is just kind of a generic name of saying like the location, like where is it, right? So where did it end and where did it begin? xf minus xi. Okay, so an ant walks to the left on a ruler and begins at the 10 centimeter mark and stops walking at the 50 centimeter mark. So it goes from the 10 centimeter to the 50. So what is the ant's displacement? So the way we're going to do these is we're always going to circle what we're solving for, and in this case is displacement. So we want to go from the initial position of 10 centimeters to the final position of 50. So my xf, or the final position where he stopped, or it stopped, is 50 centimeters. And the initial position where it began was 10 centimeters, underlining that. Now we just plug it into the equation, xf minus xi. So 50 minus 10, meaning that the total displacement would be 40 centimeters. I have to include left because this is displacement. If it just wanted distance, then it would still be 40 centimeters, but you couldn't include the direction, or wouldn't need to. And I know that it's left because if I picture that little ant, it says the ant begins at 10, walks to the left, so where it ended, I'm pointing in that direction, which is left, and that's where the direction comes from. Right, if I wanted to know the distance, again, it would still be, the whole pathway was 10 to 50, it'd still be 40 centimeters, but I just wouldn't have to say left. Okay, now, in that example, distance and displacement were the same. Here's another example. A dog stands up from his bed, walks 5 meters, stops, walks back, and goes back to sleep on the bed. The dog's overall displacement is 0, and it will always be 0 if something stops and starts in the same location. So when I get home today, even if I go to Mansfield and then I have to go to Worcester and then I have to come home, my displacement for the day would be 0 because I started from home this morning and I ended at home this evening. Now my distance would be a lot, right? But my displacement would be 0. Just like this dog's displacement would be 0. Now, he got up and walked 5 meters, went back and walked 5 meters to get to the bed again. So it went a total of 10 meters for distance. So sometimes distance and displacement are the same, sometimes they're gonna be different, and it all just depends on the situation. But you can kind of get it in your head right now. Whenever a thing is in motion and it starts and stops in the same place, it's gonna be a 0 displacement. Okay? All right. Let's stop there.
Got some videos.
Tomorrow,
Oh, tomorrow, we got some
Actually,
videos. No, we got like one.
let's finish this one real quick. It won't take long, and then we'll do all the videos tomorrow. Sorry. So, when we're talking direction, we have north, south, east, west. We also have left, right, up or down. And so if you think of like a number line, or even like a coordinate plane system, like where, you're looking at quadrant 1, 2, 3, 4, anything to the right or east is always positive. Anything up and north is going to be considered a positive direction. Anything left or west, down or south, following exactly what you already know with coordinate planes. All right, so this is not a new idea. We're just incorporating a positive direction and a negative direction, actually with like those negative signs. So if you're subtracting a negative, it changes it to a positive, right? And so it does matter if something's moving left, west, down, or south, we're gonna have to include that negative sign to show that, or that's another way to show that. All right, so it's the same as this coordinate plane system, right? Anything to the right or up is always positive. Anything to the left or south of those axis lines are going to be negative. Okay, and so that'll be a big help as we start looking at some of these motions. So we will do the videos tomorrow. Ooh.